Okay, Tri-City Sports Now, we are back, and as I told you before, we are going to be having I'm going to be covering I do this occasionally, I am a former newspaper guy, but it's right now, I think, the game of the year in the SoCon, UNCG, undefeated in the Southern Conference, and ETSU, somewhat surprisingly maybe undefeated in the Southern Conference, because they had to go on the road, and while Mercer and Samford maybe are not the teams that maybe they were thought to be, they've got losing records, this sort of thing, still strong teams. Of course, Chattanooga now 0-4, last place in the SoCon. Major rebuilding going on there at Chattanooga, and I think that a lot of that has to do just with, I've said this all along, the UT AD search. David Blackburn was so campaigning for the job that he didn't get that I halfway wonder, okay, what about, what about when he finally was canned? Chattanooga loses 2 coaches. Suddenly, they've got to replace him. And I know that also Chattanooga lost 5 starters last year, but you know what? ETSU lost 4, and they're still in first place. Chattanooga, with the most NCAA tournament appearances, I believe, among contemporary members in the conference, they're rebuilding. They're bad. They were a loser to first place Furman, a 73-55 score. I've got it right here, forgive me. Western Carolina, by the way, perhaps a little bit surprisingly, defeated Mercer by a bucket, 58-56. So Mercer, like I said, thought to be one of the teams that would compete for a championship in the Southern Conference. They're now 0-3 in the conference after losing in Cullowhee last night. So that's a little bit surprising. Of course, I got to stop here is Francis Alonso for UNCG as we break down this game. I think he's the best player in the entire conference, Alonso. Just a sharp shooter, averaging about 19 points a game. I've got it right here, the exact number, which is, give me a minute here, 18.4. Okay. I was remembering it as just a wee bit higher to go to 19 points, but 18.4 points a game. One of the best in the conference. ETSU is led by DeSanta Bradford, who has 14. Now, Alonso can shoot from the outside, and he can shoot very well. So, do you bring the guards out? And I mean, I've seen the man hit 3-pointers with the hand in his face, and you're wondering, how did he even see that? Like I said, I'm very impressed with Francis Alonso. And talking to Steve Forbes, back on Monday, we heard him say that, this is one of his favorite guys he thinks can actually play with some of the top talent that ETSU has faced at Xavier and Kentucky this year. The only thing is, he's a little bit shorter. Okay, well, if you play guard, is that really that big of a deal? And so. My thing is, though, if you're going to come out, you're going to guard him, you're going to bring the guards out, that means you got to have somebody down there in the middle, and that's where Peter Jerkin has come in. Now, offensively, Jerkin, player of the week, has been averaging 15 points a game, but defensively, that 7-foot frame clogging up the middle, this cannot be understated. I'm really looking forward to see how this comes about. If ETSU wins this game, then really, the causes of concern from bringing back only DeSanta Bradford as a starter last year, that's all out the window. You've beaten UNCG. UNCG has beaten NC State. I mean, they're a good team. ETSU 12-4 overall, UNCG 11-4. UNCG has been a little inconsistent. They only beat VMI this weekend by 2 on 2 late free throws from Francis Alonso, as a matter of fact. However, let's face facts as well. Although ETSU has been very consistent lately, winning 10 of 11, and more consistent than the Spartans, Well, the Buccaneers have had some of their inconsistencies of their own, losing to Northern Kentucky on opening day by almost 20 points, blowing the 22-point lead to Xavier, blowing a 10-point lead to Kentucky. I know there are ETSU fans that'll give the Bucks the pass for losing to major top 10 programs, or I guess Kentucky is ranked nationally in the top 21. I think that's where Kentucky is 21. They're not in the top 10, as is Xavier. But even so, you have these big leads. Coaches say you ought to hold on to those. And I don't excuse a loss when you have a 22-point lead at one point, or even a late double-digit lead, as was the case with ETSU up in Xavier, up in Ohio. So, say what you will, but I am looking forward. We'll have some sound bites and all that from that game. Winner, I mean, again, it's mid-major regular season basketball. And as exciting as having the top two teams in the conference come about, it really is, footing, who'll get the regular season number one seed in the SoCon, etc. I have theorized maybe Wofford could somehow get an at-large berth because they beat North Carolina this year. But Wofford, in order to do that, not only a game back, they've only lost one game to UNCG, as a matter of fact, in the conference. So let's say that's the only game that the Terriers lose in the regular season and in conference play, and then they lose somewhere in a Southern Conference tournament, let's say in the finals. ETSU, what the heck? ETSU, by the way, getting a lot of love as the Southern Conference representative from bracketologists. It seems like bracketologist after bracketologist projecting ETSU to be the team that would represent the SoCon. But I would just point this out, for the second straight year, by the way. Let's just say Wofford would go from here on out, lose one game if that, but then fall in the SoCon final. I guess you could make potentially an argument for Wofford with two victories over ACC teams that, they could get an at-large berth. But outside of that, it would be very tough. And frankly, Wofford's RPI right now is not as impressive as ETSU's. Why should it be? They've already lost to UNCG. The winner of this game, you still have Furman. And again, Furman beat Chattanooga. By the way, Wofford also defeated Harvard yesterday. I think it's the last out-of-conference game in a SoCon anybody's going to play. I tell you, we can double-check that, but I think that's the last. All from here on out, it's all in the SoCon. But, this is somewhat for seeding. But I don't know. I am kind of intrigued. I mean, ETSU has won all these games by 20 points. If they can do that to UNCG, you're thinking, boy, this is something special. This is something big. This is a deep team. Maybe they could win in the NCAAs. That's what you're thinking. I, though, wonder if it wouldn't be better off to have, certainly from a dramatic standpoint, a close game against UNCG, just because then it would not look like there would be one dominant team in the conference and then everybody else. I've always loved SoCon basketball. I've always thought it's a little overrated. I think it's on the upswing, what with ETSU back into the conference. It's a strong program historically, and getting them back in was a benefit to the RPI ratings of the SoCon. Of course, VMI wasn't, and that brings it down a little bit. All I can say is I just want two bids. It's never happened out of the SoCon before, but is it all that impossible if these programs continue to develop and grow? And so I guess that's one of the reasons why I say what's good for the competition in the SoCon is good for ETSU. And if you can have a lot of teams playing at a high level, if you can have a UNCG beat NC State, if you can have a Wofford beat a North Carolina, and if you can have an ETSU beat or split with Northern Kentucky and demolish Georgia Southern out of the Sun Belt, a good Georgia Southern team, and I will admit that those victories don't carry quite the cachet of beating an ACC school, but if you can continue to do this, then maybe, just maybe, the RPI can get to a place where the SoCon could one day be one of those top 10 conferences, and at that point, get a second bid. Of course, if you get to that point, then maybe, just maybe, there'll be other conferences like the CAA, like the A10 did, that want to pick off those schools, and perhaps there could be some growth for ETSU or another school in that manner. Anyway, like I said, I don't know. We discussed a little bit about ETSU maybe one day in the Sun Belt or something, making the move that Appalachian State did. But one thing to remember is this: Appalachian State's overall athletic budget is now $32 million. I saw this. I've got a friend who looks up these sort of things, and he posted this on the internet. ETSU's budget is $18 million. I was impressed by that because that's tripling the athletic budget of ETSU from earlier in this century. Just a little more than a decade ago, it was $6 million. And now it's $18 million. That's a positive. There's no question about that. But I would point this out that, still something of a ways to go. But I wonder if joining the Sun Belt didn't mean more money, TV or otherwise, for an Appalachian State. And so they could have $14 million of an athletic budget more than East Tennessee State. Second hour coming up here on Tri-City Sports Now. WEMB Irwin.